Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Tory Clark in today. We are pleased to be joined on the phone by Representative Mike Kelly, Republican of Pennsylvania, a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. He was on hand yesterday for this big hearing on the Benghazi attacks that led to the death of our ambassador and 3 others, including 2 former Navy SEALs. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Brian. Good to be with you also.
I want you to bear with me for just a moment because I want to play for our audience sort of about a minute-long cut, which was the real crux of the hearing yesterday. Now, what this is, it's a guy named Lieutenant Colonel Wood and a guy named Eric Nordstrom answering questions from Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, these guys had raised the flag and talked about how serious the situation was in Libya and specifically in Benghazi. They were asking for additional help, and they kept getting told no. Here's how that little exchange went.
Colonel Wood and Mr. Nordstrom, were you pulling your hair out? Were you just flabbergasted that, like, what can we do? What can we say? What can we put in writing? What can we say on the phone? What else can we do? Was that your sense, an attitude when you got the answers from Washington that you did?
We were fighting a losing battle. We couldn't even keep what we had. We were not even allowed to keep what we had.
If I could add to that, it was, I told the same regional director in a telephone call in Benghazi after he contacted me when I asked for 12 agents. His response to that was, you're asking for the sun, moon, and the stars. And when I responded to him, his name's Jim, I said, Jim, you know what makes most frustrating about this assignment? It's not the hardships, it's not the gunfire, it's not the threats. It's dealing and fighting against the people, programs, and personnel who are supposed to be supporting me. And I added it by saying, for me, the Taliban is on the inside of the building.
That building being the State Department. Congressman Kelly, what did you think when you heard that exchange?
What was, and you could see it, more importantly, from just the sound clip that you played. If you're sitting across from these gentlemen and you see it in their faces, the frustration. In fact, Lieutenant Colonel Wood has said, look, it was inevitable what was going to happen. Ours was the last flag flying. And when you see it in their face, because, and Lieutenant Colonel Wood jogged in the morning sometimes with Ambassador Stevens, their concern was so great for their colleagues and for those folks in our diplomatic service. Brian, when you look at this, these are people, these are women and men who put their lives on the line for the country. They go to some very dangerous places because they're such great patriots. The State Department, and this falls solely on the shoulders of the State Department, Secretary Clinton, they have to provide protection and security for those people who are going to these very dangerous places to promote the best interests of the United States. And so when you see it in the faces of the people who were actually there, on the ground, who saw it every day, and they couldn't get the help they needed from the State Department, it was really, I really felt bad for them. I could feel it. It was just tearing them apart.
Congressman, Tory Clark here, and thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for focusing on this, because it's only been recently, and thanks to the hard work of people like you, that the mainstream media are focused on this. But every day we learn more of what happened in the days, weeks, and months leading up to these attacks. This was no surprise. People knew people on the ground, like those 2 brave guys testifying yesterday, knew something like this was going to happen. And I advanced something a little bit earlier today, which sounds like a conspiracy theory, but I don't think it is that acknowledging that bad things were happening and that the situation was deteriorating there did not fit the narrative that this State Department, this administration wanted. Is it as simple as that? Is that why they refused to give these people the help they needed?
Well, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, and this one really doesn't pass the smell test. Everything is there in front of you. And I come from a real plain-speaking part of the country in western Pennsylvania. Everybody back home could connect the dots. They can see what happened. They can see, it was 9/11, for goodness sakes. You couldn't see all this stuff happening. Lieutenant Colonel Woods, ours is the last flag standing. It was inevitable. So when the people who are actually there that you rely on for that information are stonewalled and put aside, and then you got to say, what was driving it? What was driving it? And I get so tired of hearing about, you don't want to politicize this. Well, what isn't political in this town? And the fact that sometimes people put running for re-election above running the country, and I think we've seen that dramatically. When the message out there has to be that we've done a great job, we're not doing so well with our domestic policy, but my goodness, haven't we done a great job with our foreign policy? And this kind of turned the whole thing upside down.
Right.
So you try to morph it into something that's a little softer, has softer edges. Say, no, this was a YouTube video that caused this. I mean, we really have a great relationship with this part of the world. And the fact of the matter is, we don't. And when we had those folks in Benghazi that were really in great danger, and we turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to their request, you got to say, why did that happen? Did it really come about that we thought they were safe, or did we want to promote a message that we actually had things under control and we're working towards a much calmer area? And that whole section of the world, as you and I both know, and the public knows, is on fire. It's very, very dangerous right now.
We're speaking to Representative Mike Kelly, Republican from Pennsylvania, who was in the room yesterday for this hearing about Libya. Congressman, much has been said in this town about we need to find out what the president knew and when did he know it. I think there's a more intriguing question in this particular case. It's what didn't the president know, and why didn't he know it? And the question becomes, was this laid on his table? Was it part of the presidential daily brief, and he just didn't focus on it? Because we know sometimes, he didn't go to the daily brief. Is that where you're going next with your investigation?
I think Chairman Ice has been very clear about the responsibility that the Oversight Committee has, and he says, listen, the American people have the right to know, and we have the responsibility to find out for them. As we go forward, I would say this. You know what? Where has the Secretary been? Where's our Secretary of State been since all of a sudden she's disappeared from the scene? I know they rolled Ambassador Rice out to say something. Now, where would she have gotten that information? Where did Jay Carney get his information? How could they speak so emphatically and now say, well, based on the information we knew at the time? Well, come on. Listen, to me, it just smells. And I suggest if it waddles like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This one, to the American people, the people who really understand common sense people, they look at it and they say, something's wrong here. If the president didn't know, why didn't he know? And the president himself described it on the one day as we had a tough day yesterday, and then a little bit later, we had a couple bumps in the road. Yeah. But let's get on to the campaign here, and let's talk about what's really important, and that's raising funds.
Congressman, we got to leave it right there. Thank you
sir.
So much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Tori. Thanks, Brian. It's nice being with you.
Keep asking the tough questions.